In April 1943, at an Allied conference in Washington, Churchill and the US President Franklin Roosevelt agreed upon a date. D-Day, or Operation Overlord as the seaborne invasion of France was formally called, would take place in the summer of 1944. But by now, the Germans were preparing for it in earnest. Since the winter of 1941, they had been building an Atlantic wall. It was a massive series of fortifications running along the European coast from Denmark to the Spanish border. Gun emplacements had been constructed at likely landing sites. Beaches had been mined and covered in barbed wire. Obstacles had been placed in strategic places to block landing craft. Hitler had boasted, "I am the greatest builder of fortifications of all time." Hitler had also ordered an increase in troop numbers in the region. The German overall commander in the West, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, had been given 15 further divisions. But the Western European coast stretched for some 2,000 miles. He didn't have the numbers to man the entire length. Von Rundstedt faced a difficult decision. Where should he position his overstretched forces to maximize their effect? The question led to bitter arguments inside the German leadership. Von Rundstedt proposed holding a large force of panzers in reserve northwest of Paris. He could then send it in against an invasion once he knew where it was happening. But the hugely respected Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of the troops covering the sector from Holland along the French coast to the Loire, had a different view. Rommel's concern was Allied air power. He'd seen it firsthand when he'd fought the British in North Africa, and it had left a profound impression. He feared that any counterattack would be broken up by Allied aircraft long before it could go into action. Rommel had also inspected Hitler's Atlantic Wall and found much of it wanting. It had forced him to the conclusion that the best place to position the panzers were likely landing sites. That way, an invasion could be immediately pushed back before it got a foothold. Hitler compromised. Rundstedt was given a small force he could hold in reserve, though Hitler himself would have the final say as to when it could be used. The rest of the additional troops was scattered along the entire Atlantic seaboard, in accordance with Rommel's wishes. It would turn out to be the worst of all the solutions. There were neither enough reserves nor enough tanks near the coast. But in the autumn of 1943, none of this was clear.
On June 6, 1944, Allied forces began Operation Overlord, the invasion of France, and opened the long-awaited Second Front against Germany in Western Europe. Facing the overwhelming military might and the complete air superiority of the Allies, Hitler once again relied on his trusted and powerful Waffen-SS divisions to defeat the Allied armies, first in the brutal fighting in Normandy, and then in the dense forests of the Ardennes. During these decisive battles, the soldiers of the Waffen-SS repeatedly demonstrated their elite esprit de corps and aggressive fighting spirit, but in the end were unable to win the victories Hitler desired. Hitler directed that 6 Waffen-SS Panzer divisions be sent to France to thwart the expected Allied invasion against his Atlantic Wall. These included the divisions Leibstandarte, Das Reich, Hitlerjugend, Hohenstaufen, Freundesberg, and Götz von Berlichingen. In terms of equipment, personnel strength, and veteran leadership, they were among the most powerful divisions in the German army at the time and constituted 50% of the panzer formations in France. For the Waffen-SS formations, the days of having to compete with the Wehrmacht for the latest equipment were gone. A Führer order dated 3 May ensured the requisition of weapons for his favored Leibstandarte division. The equipment being sent to the elite Waffen-SS Panzer divisions was the best available. The German soldier was well equipped with excellent panzers, such as the much-feared Tiger and Panther tanks. They also possessed what may be considered the best machine gun produced at the time, the MG-42. What the grenadiers of the Waffen-SS lacked was protection against the Allied air forces and a method to counter the overwhelming Allied advantages in artillery and naval gunfire support. The training proficiency of the SS Grenadiers in Normandy varied within each division. The Leibstandarte and Das Reich divisions needed more time to train new replacements. The Hitlerjugend, along with the Freundesberg and Hohenstaufen divisions, were newer formations which had received more time to train together, but lacked the combat experience of the older SS divisions. All of the Waffen-SS divisions would have to rely heavily on their battle-hardened veteran NCOs, many of whom had been fighting since 1939. Among these veterans, the old arrogance and recklessness remained. These charismatic leaders instilled in the new replacements and young volunteers the same confidence representative of a soldier of the Waffen-SS. The bitter fighting in Normandy was very different for the Waffen-SS divisions compared to what many had experienced on the Eastern Front. They faced many new challenges, such as the complete and overwhelming air superiority of the Allies. Formations were forced to move as much as possible during the hours of darkness in order to avoid constant attack from Allied fighter bombers. Air attacks caused many delays and frustrating losses in both men and equipment. Unable to move quickly and maintain unit cohesion, the SS divisions were forced to counterattack the Allies before they could properly consolidate all of their combat forces, resulting in piecemeal attacks and heavy casualties among the SS formations. The bitter battles that took place in the Normandy countryside, much of which was crisscrossed with hedges, fields, and sunken roads, forced fighting to occur over short distances with limited visibility. This reduced the German advantages in combined infantry and armor maneuver warfare. Large-scale combined arms maneuver operations were replaced by small unit actions of infantry and individual panzers. Throughout these bitter battles, Waffen-SS formations were called upon to spearhead offensive operations and to fanatically defend against Allied offensives. The Waffen-SS divisions were always the lead elements during the critical battles in Normandy, such as those around the city of Caen, the German counterattack toward Avranches to close the Allied breakout of Operation Cobra, and the struggle to hold open the Falaise Gap. The Waffen-SS divisions were once again nearly bled white during these terrible battles. They were unable to stop the advancing tide of the Allies' overwhelming personnel and material superiority. What they did accomplish was to significantly delay the Allied advance.
Then comes the news the Allies have feared all day.
Panzers on the move! Panzers on the move!
A British reconnaissance platoon spots the Germans heading north. If they reach the ridge first, they will have a direct route to the invasion beaches. But the German panzers have left it too late. The British Shermans get there first.
There you are.
Joyce is outnumbered and outgunned. His one advantage is that he has the high ground.
Right 5.
But it will only take the Panzers seconds to target him.
Keep turning.
Everything depends on his first shot.
Turn 5. Steady. Steady. Okay, 500. And fire! Direct hit! Reload!
He takes out the lead Panzer with one shot. Now the tanks behind can't get through. Joyce is in control of the battle.
The beaches and cliffs of Normandy. In June 1944, the most important place on the planet.
It's the greatest battlefield in human history, full of incredible stories.
But some of D-Day's greatest stories remain untold because vital evidence is hidden beneath the waves. Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now we can, using accurate data and astonishing technology, to bring light once again to a lost world. What shocking weapon blew a key British warship into fragments? Can this shattered landing craft explain why Omaha was the bloodiest beach of them all?
Unloading had to be stopped because the living couldn't climb over the dead.
And why did the power of the sea mean life or death on Utah Beach?
The seas were still churned up, and as the man next to you goes down, it's the luck of the draw.
Off the coast of France, an international team is exploring a hidden battlefield, looking for the secrets of how the greatest naval invasion in history unfolded. Buried here is a treasure trove of ships, tanks, and potentially unexploded mines. These are the wrecks of D-Day, June 6, 1944. For years, Hitler had devastated Europe, killing millions. Now was the time for the Allies to make their move.
It was an all-out gamble. It was nothing less than the history of Western civilization.
But the odds were against them.
It's hell. It's about as bad as combat can get.
3 years in the making, this was the most epic struggle of the 20th century.
These are the men who made the difference. You should understand that.
D-Day required the best minds in the military, working with scientists and engineers.
D-Day is a triumph of technology and engineering.
The guys that planned the logistics for this were unbelievable.
New machines to break through Hitler's vicious defenses. Ingenious and untested ways to deliver an invading army.
I always knew it was big, but I think this makes you feel how big it is.
Today's expedition investigates how the Allies tipped the odds in their favor.
Oh, look at that.
And brings veterans back to the place where they nearly lost their lives.
I bet you never thought you'd see that again.
Oh, I tell you.
New technologies and veterans' memories come together to reveal this hallowed ground.
This hidden battlefield is one of our most sacred charges.
History's greatest invasion, D-Day, June 6, 1944. The second front in Europe, invasion from the west to speed victory. Across the English Channel to France had come the men, ships, and aircraft. 20 minutes before H hour, Allied bombers, among 11,000 aircraft in the D-Day action, swarmed over the Cherbourg Peninsula. Nazi communications, highways, and railroads were paralyzed as tons of high explosives found their mark. Then the coast of Normandy came in range of the fleet's big guns. New Nazi aircraft risked Allied firepower. The sea literally swarmed with invasion boats as the first Americans went over the side. The fighting spirit of these superb lads was as vital a factor as the gunfire. Aboard a Canadian landing boat, the camera recorded the grim battle. Ahead were mines and all sorts of barriers. One by one, the intrepid Canadians plunged into the surf amid as deadly a hail of fire as men ever faced. One Canadian and 2 British divisions landed left of Omaha Beach, where 1st Division Yanks spearheaded the attack. Omaha and Utah beaches. 1 battalion suffered 30% casualties in half an hour. The 4th Division also wrote notable chapters on the Normandy coast, and the 29th National Guard Division in combat for the first time. It was a bad day for the Nazis as the prisoner roundup mounted hourly. Hurrying to consolidate positions before the enemy could strike back, the Allies fought toward Cherbourg. D-Day was day of deliverance to Frenchmen, and everyone was eager to volunteer information. A British warship flying the Supreme Commander's flag brought General Dwight D. Eisenhower to the beachhead. "You are about to embark on a great crusade," he had told D-Day assault troops. Now, as General Omar Bradley reported to his chief, the road to victory had passed its initial stage. Also joining Ike was the ground forces commander, British Field Marshal Montgomery. Bombers and naval vessels, paratroops, gliders, and Allied soldiers had given the European invasion dramatic reality in history.
At 1:15 in the morning of June the 6th, 1944, British aircraft towing gliders arrived over the coast of northern France. Then the gliders were released and plunged down to capture vital bridges over the Caen Canal in eastern Normandy. The Allies had launched their great gamble to invade Hitler's empire in Western Europe. "50 miles to the west, US paratroops came down around the village of Saint-Mère-Église. There was a fierce firefight. But 3 hours later, the village was in US hands. One of the most crucial battles of World War II was underway. An hour later, horrified German sentries along the Normandy coast saw a vast armada appear out of the mist. They had had no warning. The Allied fleet had sailed under cover of darkness. Moreover, Allied countermeasures had confused the German radar into believing the main weight of the attack was approaching the French coast further east at the Pas-de-Calais. Allied warships off the Normandy coast now began pounding the German defensive positions. Wave after wave of aircraft swept overhead. Under cover of the bombardment, assault troops headed for the shore. But as they closed in, German artillery and machine guns opened fire. number of the landing craft were hit. Others fell foul of underwater obstructions. But at 6:30 in the morning, the first waves of troops hit the beaches. At the far western end, the US 4th Infantry Division came ashore near at what they called Utah Beach. Within 2 hours, it was linking up with the US paratroopers who'd landed at Saint-Mère-Église. Next door, at Omaha Beach, it was more difficult. The beach was a defender's dream, with high cliffs and few ways inland. As the US 1st Infantry Division waded ashore, they were mown down by German machine guns. To make matters worse, the Americans' amphibious tanks were swamped. The troops were trapped on the beach. Disaster was looming. But finally, a few of the soldiers managed to scale the cliffs. Against all the odds, the Americans hung on to the beachhead. Further east, in the center of the landing area, Britain's 50th Infantry Division came ashore at Gold Beach. They too met savage fire. But now, the British deployed their funnies. The troops were soon moving inland. At the adjoining landing spot, Juno Beach, the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division faced a similar situation. Here too, Britain's funnies were vital in helping the troops off the beach. Finally, on the far left flank, at Sword Beach, the British 3rd Infantry Division met only patchy resistance. Within hours, its commandos had linked up with the glider-borne troops at the Caen Canal. By early afternoon, the Allies had successfully established all of the beachheads. The timing of the invasion had caught the Germans completely by surprise. They'd expected the Allies to wait until the weather had cleared. Rommel, the operational German commander for the whole of the northwest French coast, had taken the opportunity of bad weather to visit his family in Germany. His immediate subordinate in Normandy and Brittany, General Friedrich Dollmann, was over 100 miles away, taking part in a war game exercise. Only the overall German commander for the whole of Western Europe, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, was at his HQ. But he needed Hitler's permission to move his panzer reserves to the battlefield. However, Hitler was asleep, and his aides wouldn't wake him. It wasn't until midday that the Führer finally learnt about the invasion, but he didn't take it seriously. he was still convinced the main attack would come in the Pas-de-Calais. Normandy, he believed, was just a feint. Finally, in the late afternoon, when the scale of the invasion was becoming all too clear, Hitler unleashed his reserves. But they were too far away to provide immediate support. Despite stubborn German resistance, the beachheads around Utah, Gold and Juno and Sword were secure. Only at Omaha was the situation more precarious. By nightfall on June the 6th, over 100,000 Allied troops had been landed in Normandy. It had been an extraordinary feat of planning, ingenuity, and courage. The first day of the Allies' great gamble had paid off. But it was just the beginning. Now they had to build up, break out, and push on into Europe.